Grab the family, grab a flight, and grab a breakaway with citywing.com, sponsors of Women Today.
Hello and welcome to the Women Today podcast. From female hair loss and cricket to the thoughts of a local trade unionist, it's been a busy week. Well, our guest today, as I say, is a potter or a ceramic artist, depending on how you like to define her, who was raised in the Isle of Man, trained in Australia, and now has her own studio in Kirkmichael, which is going to be open to the public as part of the Western Open Studio Art Trail this weekend. Katie Mitchell, thank you so much for being our guest this afternoon. I'm really, really sorry about this in advance. I just couldn't resist.
Oh, no.
It was the first thing I thought of when you got in touch with us.
I apologise. It's the only thing that people think of when they hear that I'm a potter. It's the only cultural reference.
I'm sorry. I'm
Beth,
sorry.
Why did you do
sorry
that to
I let
me?
you down. I let you down. But, you know, was it in any way an inspiration, that scene?
No. And the one time I tried to watch that movie, the DVD kind of started skipping about halfway through, and it got to that particular scene and the DVD stopped. It refused to play any further, so I think that means that I'm not supposed to watch the film.
It was a sign. I'll get rid of it. Okay. Just tell me then, what sort of upbringing did you have? Was this something that was always in your family?
I was always a really creative kid. I was always drawing a lot, probably a way of keeping me quiet, I imagine. But I didn't start working with ceramics till I was a teenager. A lot of people might know Craftwork Studio down at Silverdale. It's a ceramic painting studio, and I worked there throughout my teen years, Saturdays and weekends, that kind of thing. And I absolutely loved it. And then when I went over to Australia to go to college, I learnt how to make all ceramics from scratch, so wheel throwing, and be responsible for the whole process.
Just tell me about how you ended up going to Australia, because it's not the first place I would think of to go and train for something like this.
No, it wasn't. I didn't go there with the intention of that specific training. I have some family in Melbourne, and it sounded like a really great city, really cultural, really creative. So it seemed like a good place to go to travel. The intention was to stay in Australia just for a year and backpack, but I actually fell in love with Melbourne. It's a great city. So I stayed there for a year, and then I moved up to the Gold Coast, which is about an hour south of Brisbane. And I was there for about 4 years, and that's where I went to art college. And ended up with a really wonderful teacher in ceramics, and yeah, she got me completely hooked.
And then you came back here a couple of years ago. What was it that brought you back?
I actually ran out of visa options, unfortunately. I loved Australia, and I thought I would probably spend the rest of my life there. But I had to come home on quite short notice, unfortunately. And yeah, I came back to the island. I've still got family here, and it's the place that I call home. And I enrolled on the small business startup scheme and got some assistance from the Arts Council, and they helped me to set up a small studio space in Kirkmichael.
Wonderful. Well, we'll be talking more about that a little bit later, and also finding out about how people can come and see you at the weekend. I'm just a little bit disappointed about the ghost thing.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, you thought the same, Jo, didn't you? Yeah.
I did. I loved that movie. That bit is a bit corny looking back. But it wasn't corny at the time. I don't think. I think it's looking back on it now, it looks corny.
Now, on the programme last week, we talked about a study which raised concerns about the number of young people, and especially girls, who are experiencing problems with their emotional well-being. It followed a study of 1,900 youngsters who were interviewed in 2009 and then again 5 years later. And those carrying out the research were really concerned by the apparent spike in girls reporting emotional issues. Now, it's been blamed on a number of things, including the pressures put on young people and the early sexualisation of girls in particular. But it's really left us wondering, how can we bring up our children to be as emotionally well as possible? And it's a question I put to the Women Today laughologist Stephanie Davis, who's done quite a lot of work in this area.
What is on the rise, what that we know, is the mental health of all young children, and I think what we have to look at is the structures that we have around improving mental health from early years right through to coping skills with children in school up to sixth form level and above and beyond. More and more is expected of children in terms of exam results and playfulness, and that part of development is so important, and we're forgetting how important that is for coping skills.
The interesting thing, I suppose, now is that you have children who are growing up in a generation where they have iPads, they have all the games consoles, and many are choosing not to play outside and do that sort of traditional play. So do you think that has a real impact on them?
We don't know. There's not been any research that's had enough length of time to really understand and study what impact that has. However, we do know that playing outside and taking risks and learning to cope if you fall over and get up by yourself does have an impact on how you cope with stuff. I think what we do need to look at is improving early years interventions and really looking at giving children coping skills when they're in schools with exams. And also, do we really need measures as young? In Holland and places like that, the children don't go to school officially till they're 7, but they have the better rates of measures or outcomes and exam results with the children. They have positive mental health, and it's because they put really strong focus on early years support, parental support.
Okay, well, for parents listening, there isn't a great deal you can do about the educational system generally, but in terms of bringing up your own children as well as you possibly can do, what are the practical things that we can do?
So number one, get them off their iPads and make sure that they do.
Easier said than done.
Much easier said than done, and do it, in short bursts. So just say, okay, an hour off now, and off you go and play. Then you can have them back, and it is about getting through that tough part of it, and then it becomes a norm, and children actually then enjoy it and they don't miss it. So get them off their iPads and get them playing out and using their imagination. That's number one. Number two is, if they fall over, make mistakes or do things, make sure that they know that it's not the end of the world, that it is okay. Give them coping skills. So if they say they are stressed about things, ask them to, talk to them about, where do you feel stressed? Where does it feel? And how do you feel better? How can you focus on something that makes you feel better? How can you give them even small little mantras to say over to themselves when they are stressed? So that's a coping skill. And also watch out for signs with your young girls and young boys as well. Watch out for those signs that might be small things that you're noticing are different, and then pick up on those and talk. Most important thing, keep talking to them.
One of the things that the study did highlight as a possible area of concern is the early sexualisation of girls, particularly in this world again where we are bombarded by images. How do you deal with that?
Don't give in to them. Parental stops on computers, really, really important, and there's loads out there that you can do now. The other thing is, don't buy in and give in to buying things like bras for young girls. Sexualisation of young girls. And if you think about the way bras are designed, they are just there to support. So get something that supports them, but not that sexualises them. That you get them pink and padded and rounded, so they show the shape of the breast. It's unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary. And it is about, obviously your daughters will be going to school and saying, well, she's got this type and they've got that type. But, it's about making a stand and saying, well, you don't need them just yet until they're at an age where they can understand it. Talk to them about sex. Get them to talk to you about sex. Open up those doors, and it's a difficult thing to do, but make it as open as possible. So when they possibly do come across stuff on the internet, which they probably will, or they'll see stuff in school, they know what's right and what's wrong about it as well. So you are really open about them talking to you about sex and the rights and wrongs of it.
That's Stephanie Davis with some interesting thoughts there. Jo, I know we do come back to this subject time and time again, but I think it's absolutely crucial and something that I know we both, bringing up children, find really worrying. How do you do it and bring them up to be as well-rounded as possible?
My ears pricked up there when you said, so how do we do it? And I was screaming in the studio going, yes, please tell me, how do we do it? Do you know what? I am bringing up a 13-year-old and 11-year-old. So I've got a 13-year-old girl and 11-year-old boy. And I will, hand on my heart, say I find it incredibly difficult in this generation that we live in. One of the biggest problems, Steph said there, for instance, that we need to try and get our kids to play outside more, and I agree with that. And that's all very well if you've got, like I have, a son that loves football. He can go out and do that, and is happy to come off his Xbox to go out and do that. However, my daughter, for instance, how do I get a teenager to go and play outside? It's very, very difficult. I regularly check her gadgets to see what's going on there, and the big biggest problem I feel is that they feel as if the world's against them for a start, and they, at 13 it's all quite hard work, isn't it? But things like, for instance, screenshotting conversations and sending them to each other of private chats, nothing's private anymore, and they get their arguments out there, and that's really difficult, isn't it? Because girls, the biggest thing in their life at this stage, it's friendships, and I think that they struggle with this. So chatting to them about relationships, whether it's friendships or sexual relationships, I think is incredibly important.
I think you're right about the generational pressures now, and I think back to when I was sort of growing up, not that long ago. Really? Come on, guys. But, there wasn't the same pressure, but it's still a difficult time, isn't it, Susie? I mean, growing up, being a teenager, it's notoriously difficult. It's kind of supposed to be, isn't it?
I think I was very, very lucky because my little soldier, of course, was perfect in every way. But I know when I was growing up, I'd decided at a very early age that I was the most ugly girl in the world, and I was staying in my room, so I was no trouble at all.
You've got 3 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Do you think that you see the sort of pressures there, what the eldest sort of like about 8 years of age? Do you see it in her?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they're well-rounded, and obviously I would say that they're mine and I adore them, but I would like to be, in the parental position, certainly. Not these days.
We've had a text in from Dave who says, at last a person who says, just say no, you can't have it. More parents need to be stricter. He says he is a very strict father. Jane, it's really interesting. You're nodding there. You don't actually have children yourself, but do you think that maybe parents do need to be a little bit stricter these days?
I think it's the social aspect too of television, computers, everything else. It's just, go and sit there and do this. And when they're out shopping, kids will pick things up and parents will allow them to put them in their baskets. And I think we should be less tolerant and to say no. You can't have that,
We just had a text in again saying children need parents to spend time with them, not money on them, which I think is true. And going back to the emotional well-being of teens and, any age of child we can be talking about here, it is all about talking, isn't it? It's all just about making sure that you don't just let them go on these gadgets and let them go into the privacy of their bedroom and spend hours on them and not acknowledge that you need to check what's going on, because I can promise you this, if you actually take a minute and go and look into their gadgets and see what's going on, it's horrendous, some of these things that they say to each other.
But I'm going to say, Jo, do you think that's really a parent's right? I mean, surely there are certain things that a teenager needs to go through, rites of passage, that actually needs to be done without their parents knowing about it.
I get where you're coming from, because of course we used to write diaries, and I would have hated my mum to have read my diary, and I
She
do
did.
get that totally. Yeah, you've probably got proof of that. Great. Yeah, one of my mum's friends sat here with me. But no, for sure, I do agree. I'm not talking every day, but if there is a change in mood, like Steph says, be aware of that and maybe have a look and see why there's a change of mood, because it could be that they're being bullied online that you need to know about and chat with them about.
I just worry about the trust issue there, because if you want your children to open up to you, they have to know that you are giving them space and that you trust them in a certain way. And if they think that's being violated, I wonder whether they'd just close down almost. Hugh, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a grandparent too, and I hope my sons aren't listening to this. When I have conversations with other grandparents, we all get on to the same thing and all have very similar views, that the parameters aren't clear in the way they perhaps were in our day, that we set very clear parameters and we were consistent about it, and everything with our grandchildren takes twice as long as it did with our children, because there are so many collective negotiation situations where the parameters are not clear and the borders keep being fuzzy. And so I think having clear, not rules is the wrong word, you must give them plenty of space, but clear parameters is helpful. It's much more difficult now than it used to be, with Facebook and Twitter and all those intrusions. And of course, one's grandchildren spend a lot of time looking at screens, so it's really important to spend time talking to them and building a relationship before they become teenagers.
Hugh, I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the problems in our society today is we as parents try maybe to be friends with our children. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they've got loads of friends to be able to do that. They've only got one mum and one dad perhaps to do that. And they do need to have parameters around them. But it seems to be a problem with just saying no these days, isn't there? No, you can't have that. Or you can have the iPad for an hour. Let's negotiate on that. But after the hour's finished, you go outside and play.
I think the hard thing is when your children see what other children are allowed, and you may be very, very strict in your boundaries and guidelines of what you want, but then they see their friends and they think that you are treating them very, very unfairly.
My grandchildren don't have a television, and I thought that was a bit mean. But thinking about it now, I think it quite works.
Hey, Red, you're making me wish I was those jeans.
Well, I wish I was your yellow hat.
What?
It's my favorite color. Did I say something wrong?
Okay, I'm sorry about the jeans thing. You made your point.
And my point is...
that I say these things to women, even though I got a mother that I love and 3 beautiful sisters, okay?
Well, that was a clip from the Netflix series Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. I can't imagine many women having a conversation like that with builders, but there are a group of construction workers in the UK who may be thinking twice before heckling female passers-by again. Police officers have spoken to a group of builders after a woman complained that they'd wolf whistled at her on her way to work. 23-year-old Poppy Smart has compared it to racial discrimination, claiming it's ruined her daily walk to the office in Worcester. She recorded the constant whistling using her smartphone's video function and also contacted one of the construction companies working at the site to complain about sexual harassment. West Mercia police say they looked into the reports of possible antisocial behaviour but have decided to take no further action. So today we're asking what you think. Should action be taken if a woman feels that she has been harassed by wolf whistling? Susie?
Bring it on. That'd be nice.
Right. Oh, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the whole story around this, do we? Because as with everything, we just get part of it. But the fact that she had her phone at that exact moment out, ready to record it, I'm a little bit cynical about it.
I think the fact is that she had walked that way quite a number of times and it had happened time and time again. But, I mean, that does suggest maybe she could have walked a different way to work. I don't know. Katie, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that asking the police to take action is a little bit extreme.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think, having not been whistled at like that for a very long time... thanks, Alex. That was beautiful. My main concern is always that, if you turn around and it wasn't for you, that would be exceedingly embarrassing. But there's a difference, I think, between being whistled at in... a kind of amusing kind of way and then being heckled and them shouting things at you, which I think can be incredibly intimidating.
Oh, that would be horrible, yeah.
There's a big difference, isn't there? And that's not nice. We were talking about stalking, for instance, and any of those kind of acts are just inappropriate completely. But I'm with you, Susie. I wouldn't mind being whistled at. It'd be quite nice. It doesn't happen. I know. And the other thing, if you get whistled on the Isle of Man, you kind of turn around and know them. That's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very embarrassing.
What's that Coca-Cola chap then that they used on the television ad? And all the girls were like lusting after the poor soul, and he didn't seem to mind, did he?
Yeah, good point. 11 o'clock hour. Wasn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah. Well,
you knew that.
Have we got one of those in Manx Radio?
You're right, Alex. Just some differing opinions from people coming in on text message and also on Facebook as well this afternoon. Somebody says, for what it's worth, I think wolf whistling is entirely inappropriate. Pam says, we don't have enough information about the situation this young lady's talking about. If it wasn't just whistling but also shouting out offensive, abusive remarks and using bad language, then it is definitely not acceptable. And if it's bad enough, then it should be treated as criminal behaviour. However, a few wolf whistles from a few basically good-humoured guys on a building site, then no. In my experience, a long time ago now, Pam says, it's a bit of a joke, just shout a cheeky remark back to them. The trouble is with that, you can never think of it, can you? You can never think of it at the time. Some comments from Facebook, Joe?
We've got Carol says, silly girl, they only gave wolf whistle. They didn't attack her physically, did they? She needs to grow up. If she didn't like them whistling, she could have walked a different route. She needs to learn to grow up and stop wasting plea time. Jay says, those of you who think it's ridiculous, have you actually read the article? She was stopped on her way to work every day for a month to be harassed. Would you really invite that into your life? Pauline says, can't beat a woo, and women whistle at blokes, and more along that line.
Go to the Women's Day Facebook page if you'd like to contribute to the debate after the programme has finished. Paul has just texted in to say, I know a man that would wolf whistle at Susie.
Oh, bless.
Alex, do you ever wolf whistle apart from when I prompt you like that?
I don't think I've ever wolf whistled, to be honest. No, I've never been on a building site, I suppose. But no, I just seem to think that it does seem to be a bit over the top, going to the police for this. I'm a bit cynical about it. And as Susie says, there didn't seem to be any problem. The world seems to love the the Diet Coke break, where women objectify men in the same sort of way. So I think there's a certain part of me that thinks that everybody now makes such a big deal out of something that, okay, if it had gone too far, yes, there's a problem, but no, live and let live.
Who is more likely to get girls and women into sport? Well, according to a new survey by Women in Sport, it's teachers rather than sporting stars or icons. Now, this report builds upon previous studies which show that girls' participation in sport declines much earlier than commonly thought. It's actually apparently from the age of 8. Well, Ruth Holdaway is CEO of the Women in Sport charity, and earlier this morning Kate spoke to her to find out more.
We want all women and girls to see sport as something that's available to them, and we want everyone to give it a go so they can get all the health benefits of playing sport, but also the other benefits that come from working as part of a team and learning about winning and losing. So one of the key things that we wanted to understand a bit more about was around role models. We often hear that role models are really important to inspire women to play sport. So we wanted to investigate this a bit further, and what we found was really interesting. Elite role models do have a role to play. It's important that women and girls can see our amazing athletes like Jessica Ennis-Hill, for example, Victoria Pendleton, and others, and see their successes. But actually, that's not what's really going to inspire women and girls to play sport. It's more likely to be somebody very close to them, a family member, a friend, a teacher at school. If they can see somebody who's like them giving it a go, not necessarily someone who's super sporty in inverted commas, but someone who, just like them, finds it tough maybe, but wants to have a try, that's going to be much more of an influence and is more likely to persuade those women and girls to have a go at sport.
Why aren't they already inspired? Why aren't they already getting involved?
There are lots of barriers to women's participation in sport. Sport has traditionally been designed by men for men, and we understand a lot of those barriers much better now. What we're trying to do at Women in Sport is really shift the focus to solutions. So we have done research into women's lives. We've looked at what it is women value and how sport can kind of tap into those values. And now we've also looked at these influencing or sway factors that are going to help persuade those of us that are not naturally sporty to get out there and have a try.
Well, I can certainly admit to being one of those women.
And of course there are so many of us out there, and we know that women lead incredibly busy lives, and if you've got a family, you're often kind of the primary carer in the family. You've got lots of responsibilities, career women out there trying to juggle so many things. It's not easy to find the time. It's not easy to necessarily commit to a team sport that requires you to train at the same time every week. So we're trying to help sports understand that and offer something a bit different.
Well, you mentioned these sway factors. I believe that there are 6. They include things like possibilities and togetherness.
Yeah, so Possibilities is all about sport being open to women. It's things like the This Girl Can campaign, which show real women, not just elite athletes, but women just like you and me having a go at sport. It's really important that sports understand that they need to show these kinds of images when they're marketing their opportunities. That's going to be much more appealing to women and girls. Togetherness is all about the kind of social aspects of sport, the fact that women and girls love to, participate together. So if you can offer activities that are going to be suitable for families to take part in together, or for a woman and her best friend to go along to, that's going to also be more attractive. Then there's things like support. So making sure that kind of behind the scenes, there's somebody there to kind of gee people up. When you're starting out on something new, you need a lot of encouragement and kind of some emotional support. So that's really important. And also at home, it's important that a woman kind of is given support in terms of having the time to go out and take part in sport. Belonging is another one. This is about, enjoying being part of the team. And then finally, it's all about kind of reflecting on success. So progression and self-awareness of progress. So being able to help women reflect on how much they've achieved.
Do you ever worry about perhaps losing the kind of essence of competition amongst all this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And again, the research that we've done at Women in Sport shows that it's important for women and girls that sport is offered both competitively and non-competitively. There are lots of ways in which sport can kind of adapt and use kind of more sociable and perhaps skills-based or fitness-based activities, sort of based around different types of sport. So those things are really important, but I don't think we're ever going to lose sight of the fact that, many women love competitive aspects of sport, and sport is inherently competitive. And actually, things like coping with winning and losing are really important aspects of playing sport that are particularly important for young girls, but, help give all of us strength throughout our lives. And we also know that women who have played sport often are very successful in business, and it's because of these skills that you learn and the resilience that you kind of build up. So we're not wanting to lose those competitive aspects at all, but it's about offering a range and offering different types of opportunities.
Oh, good, because we're certainly competitive here at Women Today.
Good, glad to hear it.
Just finally then, obviously we're not part of the UK. I just wondered if Women in Sport has any specific plans that involve the Isle of Man.
Well, we would love to work with you, but as with all of our programmes and activities, we're a charity and we're totally reliant on donations. So we're looking for businesses that want to improve the female workforce and to do that and empower women through sport. We're looking for them to come and join us. We're looking for any funding opportunities that are going to enable us to, work with the widest possible range of people. So please, anyone out there that wants to help us, do get in touch. We've launched a new website today, womeninsport.org, and all the information you would need about contacting us is on that site.
That's Ruth Holdaway, who's the CEO of the Women in Sport charity. Greg, let's just come to you first. Just listening to that interview, what's your initial reaction to what she was saying?
Agree with large elements of it. As always with sport, there's a lot of opinions. There's certain elements of it that I'd challenge and question.
Which ones?
Opportunity and stereotyping are some that I think women's sport get branded with. So netball, traditionally a women's sport, you don't see many men playing netball. But there's more and more other sports offering women the opportunity and girls the opportunity to play. Cricket they do, football they do. A lot of it's the media coverage, which wasn't mentioned there, about how much coverage sport gets, which I think's quite key to actually see sports develop.
And I mean, I would argue maybe there's quite a lot of coverage of sport. Are you thinking there's not enough?
Not of women's sport. So if you look at Sky, who have now got the women's only sort of dedicated areas, and that's because you've got 24 hours of predominantly male sport being hammered at you over and over again, and then they get 2 hours coverage a week of women's sport and everything crammed into a small area.
I wonder whether a lot of the issue, I mean, I know there is a focus on competition and we've all admitted that we are quite competitive, but something we've talked about on the show before is the fact that sometimes you just want to do it because you enjoy the sport, not because you want to be elite at it, not because you want to be fantastic, but just because you want to go out and actually take part in it.
And that's where I think what she was saying about kind of internalising and reflecting on your achievements really comes into it, doesn't it? If you want to enjoy something, you want someone to say, well done, and you want someone to talk to you and give you feedback, and you still want to improve whilst enjoying it, surely.
Do you though? I just think actually I'd be quite happy if I'm not doing it because I want to win something or I want to make a specific achievement. I'd be quite happy to just go out, have a go and go home again.
Would you do it again then?
Might do, if I didn't feel the pressure on me that I had to reach a certain level.
Oh, Beth.
What?
You're so competitive. That's just such nonsense. You would go back and try and get better at it. What a load of rubbish. When it comes to primary schools, what gets me and what she talked about there was the winning and losing. Do you know what really annoys me is we've taken that away. So in primary schools, for instance, I mean, I know we're not specifically talking about kids here, we're talking about women as well, but we're trying to enforce that fair play. And, at sports days, they don't have the winning and the losing element so much anymore, whereas she's saying we do need to have that as such. Going back to the role models, I find this really confusing in a way, because I think it really is depending on the teacher and the teacher's passion in it. Because a role model works in a sport if you're already interested in a sport. So say, as in a sports star. So say, for instance, I was interested in, giving an example, running. Then Paula Radcliffe may be my role model, but I'd have to be interested in it in the first place. Do you see where I am with this? So the teacher needs to be someone that I can connect with. So that depends on the teacher and if they're passionate enough about it as well, doesn't it?
But I like what she was saying about having realistic role models that you can still look up to and see someone else enjoying it for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I think one of the key things that Ruth mentioned there was the time issue for women particularly, because I think traditionally the weekend has been seen as the man's time. If you're in that, if you've got the mother and the father and children, it's the man's time to go out and do sport. I mean, me and my friends refer to ourselves as the cycle widows on Sunday morning, and if you look out and about, it is generally the men who are out at the weekend doing the sport. So it's, where do you find the time?
And also I think, as she mentioned, it's that difficulty of having to go every single week at the same time, and if you miss a session, then you're behind or you can't go again, and it's a really difficult thing to fit into a busy life.
And just staying on what you were talking about, Jo, and thinking about children, I was really interested in this study by the Marylebone Cricket Club and the Chance to Shine charity, because they're talking about children being put off sport at ages as young as 8 because of their pushy, abusive parents. Youngsters told the report that they were sometimes told that they were too heavy or lazy to run, and some of the pupils questioned by the charity said their mothers and fathers have even sworn at them while they're taking part in sport. Now, Greg, I would always imagine that cricket was a fairly civilised game.
Yes, has been, but obviously the influence of other sports plus television, etc., going back to media, people see things on telly and they can perceive it wrong. If you think of the sledging in cricket, that's moving its way into junior cricket, and people don't really understand what sledging is about, and it's not done with any sort of venom or anything. It's usually humorous, but the average younger cricketer can then sort of get carried away with it and think that just throwing in an insult is the way that it's done, and it's not.
Sorry, sledging?
Sledging is when one player, rather than play with a bat and a ball, uses their mouth and starts to abuse somebody. They call it mental disintegration and stuff like that, so using words to get into someone's head.
Would you think that cricket may be a pushy parent thing, though? Do you see that much in cricket?
More and more so of late. People shouting from the boundaries. Obviously, the boundary is a long way away for kids, so for parents to be heard, it was not the dumb thing. They didn't shout so as the children could hear them in the middle. I have witnessed it more and more over the last few years that it comes in.
Wasn't me, okay? My son just played cricket, wasn't me. David says, how can Paula Radcliffe be your role model when she was once filmed on TV weeing in the gutter towards the end of a marathon?
Total fair play and respect to her, because if it has to be done to help her improve her performance, it has to be done.
And you see the guys who are in the Tour de France, you see them filmed as they stop to have a little tinkle in the hedge, so yeah. I have a couple, says Nick, who bring their boys into the sweet shop I own, and they get 25 pence worth of sweets for each goal they scored at football earlier that day.
Oh, that's just, it just sickens me. That makes me feel so sad.
Another text from David. Interesting point raised about competition sport in primary schools. At my children's school, the head has banned the traditional annual prize giving at the Leavers Assembly for Year 6 on the basis that not all children can be awarded a prize. The contradiction here that he has maintained Sports Day, not all children can get a place on the podium. Greg, what do you think about the whole issue of competitiveness in schools?
My views changed on it a couple of years ago when I was fortunate enough to sit down and actually have it explained to me. And it's about skills acquisition, and at a young age being able to just keep trying things, not be afraid to fail, keep getting better, not fearing failure, and then if you do make a mistake, go back, do it again. If you bring winning and losing into it, human nature says that you'll do the bare minimum that you need to do to win. Therefore, if somebody's quite talented at a young age or has ability at a young age, they won't necessarily want to improve because they'll win, so they've done enough, so they don't need to actually push themselves any further. if winning becomes the goal.
Interesting point. Vicky has texted in about winning and losing. She says, as a regular loser, for example, second reserve, a second hockey team at school, I would love to have been offered sport where there were no losers, such as aerobics. At 65, I still have useless at sport imprinted on my psyche.
Do you know what, that's a weird one. I have the same thing with singing, and I can't sing, but I have the same issue that someone once, when I was very young, told me I can't sing, and now it is my worst nightmare to have to stand on stage and sing to people. So it really does stick with you. But Greg, did you ever see that sort of reward for cricket playing or anything like that?
Quite a lot. They class it as secondary motivation, where primary motivation is playing the sport because you love it and you want to do it. Secondary motivation is about playing for rewards. We had a kid in a Derbyshire squad who was 9 years old, who was playing in a festival. His dad gave him £1 a run, £5 a wicket, and over the course of a 4-day festival he ended up with 460 something pounds as a 9-year-old kid as his reward for playing for that week. Didn't agree with it whatsoever. The rest of the season, in the lead up to the festival, he didn't have the best of seasons. He didn't score hardly any runs and he didn't take any wickets.
Got no pocket money then. Now, our guest was born here in the Isle of Man, raised in Peel, and says she toed and froed between the Isle of Man and Northern Ireland from the age of 8. Angela Moffat is the negotiations officer for the Prospect Union. Angela, thanks very much for being here. How would you describe your childhood?
Well, it was Peel in the 70s, so basic. No, it was a really great childhood, to be honest, because I think the Isle of Man is great for kids. I know everybody says it's quite limited, but in terms of what kids love, beaches, fresh air, running around, the Isle of Man's perfect for that because it's safe. But like I say, it was Peel in the 70s, so there wasn't an awful lot of frills, and I certainly didn't come from a privileged background. So,
how politically minded were you as a youngster?
I wasn't. I don't think you. I think, I always say, people say, "Oh, you're in the job you're in because of your dad," and I say no. It was because of Robin Hood, actually, because I absolutely loved Robin Hood when I was a kid. I loved the stories, and so I suppose if you think sort of being obsessed with stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, maybe I was quite politically minded for a kid in a way I didn't realise.
You mentioned your father there, Bernard Moffat, a very well-known voice here in the island. I guess then, if you weren't influenced by him as a role model, would you say now, looking back, you kind of try and model yourself on him?
No, I mean, I find it kind of offensive, really, in a way that people fixate on my dad to the degree they do, because I do have a mother. And actually, my mother and the women in my life were actually a far more formative influence. They were around a lot more and doing a lot more stuff. Like I say, another feature of life in the 70s. It tended, there was a less balanced experience of childcare, shall we say, amongst the genders. But, there were a lot of really, really strong women in my life as a child. Certainly my father's mother, who I've named my daughter after, an amazingly tough woman. I mean, terrifyingly so, a battle axe in some ways. Far more of a role model than my father was. I mean, in some senses, the women in my life taught me that men were incidental. They were kind of like a nice to have around, but not essential. So maybe that's a bad thing. Almost reverse sexism amongst the women on both sides of my family. Mm.
Well, you went to Queen's University in Belfast, where you studied politics, and you lived in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. What was that like, and how much of an impact would you say that's had on you?
That was a massive, massive influence, because I moved over there when I was about 8, and I had no idea what a Protestant or a Catholic was, and I moved to a very Protestant community. I was raised in a family where, my stepfather was in the Ulster Defence Regiment. So it was a very militarised background. There was very security conscious way that I grew up. Things like having to check the car for bombs before you got in it, and not being able to answer the door, and so on. There was constant threat. So that was a really, really strange and weird way to grow up, and one that I never really got used to, in a way that kids who were born and been there from day one got used to. So that was a massive, massive influence on me. Something I find very difficult now when I go back is the lack of military presence and the lack of the Troubles. It almost feels like Northern Ireland is strange and weird without a strong army presence.
Because you moved back over to the Isle of Man at the time of the ceasefire. What was that, 1997?
Just before the Good Friday Agreement and so on. They were just starting to move towards that. But that one of the reasons that I came back was it was just. It was ridiculous at that time. Certainly the areas that I was living in, Belfast, you were seeing riots, and that led to my decision to come back here because there was no employment apart from anything else.
I'm really interested in something you say while you were at university. You describe yourself as a bit of a student activist in the student union. What sort of things were you getting involved in?
It was ludicrous. It was play politics, but good fun. At the time, the British government was. I'm probably the last kind of generation that got a student grant. I got a student grant, and they'd started to morph to loans. So part of what you lived on was grant, and part of it was a loan, and the proportion that was loaned got bigger as I went through university. And it was all the protests against the removal of grants, the removal of summer housing benefit, things like this, which supported students. And we did student occupations and stuff like that, which was hilariously good fun. Student demonstrations, things like that. I think, it's kind of now when you go back to Queen's, because I visit from time to time, that level of student activism certainly doesn't exist in Northern Ireland. And I think a lot of universities have lost that kind of left-wing militant kind of, party politics kind of divide, which was actually enormously good fun, and I think which taught people how to interact and become involved in politics in a constructive way. So students, I think, are far more apolitical now. They're far more focused on their careers and CVs.
And Facebook? Do you think they're just playing out all the complaints and the fighting online instead?
Yeah, and I think, and possibly, the kind of social drinking aspect is still to the fore in the way it was. So some things don't change.
Now, you do say that you're a child of divorced parents, and I wonder if you think that had any impact on you, quite aside from the fact that obviously it meant quite a big move for you sort of at the age of 8.
Yeah, I mean, how could it not? And you kind of do think, I've ended up, I'm separated from my husband. I have a very good relationship and I've got a lot of respect for him, but you do kind of think do broken homes make broken homes. But at the time you can think it's a terrible thing. And I think in terms of kids from divorced backgrounds, again, in the 70s, I don't think there was an awareness of the impact divorce had on kids in the way there is now. But I think in a way it was a good influence too. It certainly taught me a lot more resilience and independence than I might have got otherwise.
David Beckham has beaten his fashion designer wife in a poll of the most stylish Britons of all time. The ex-footballer is the highest placed man in 3rd place, Joe's cheering, while the former Spice Girl is 9th. That's according to a survey of 2,000 people. Breakfast at Tiffany's actress Audrey Hepburn, who had British citizenship, tops the list. Princess Diana is listed 2nd, while the Duchess of Cambridge is 4th. But interestingly, those 2,000 people who were interviewed for the poll were also asked about style rules for women of a certain age, and they said women over the age of 30 should avoid hot pants, miniskirts and tube tops, also known as boob tubes in my day. And we're asking, what do you think, Jo?
I do think that women should be allowed to wear what they want, but I also think they should be thinking that they, that if they've got kids, etc., or nieces and nephews, they need to look like role models, maybe. So, I don't like hot pants on 60-year-old women, for instance. It's just, I don't think it looks that attractive. It was
Susie?
interesting.
How dare you?
Sorry.
What's wrong with my hot pants?
She's wearing a hot pants. She wore them specially. They're in the winter pink.
I think Alex looks particularly fetching in his boob tube.
Oh, Susie.
I know,
This is just the beginning.
But Susie, what do you reckon?
I don't know. I sometimes wonder. I think some people, and I'm not being mean here, but they look in a mirror and see something completely different, because the thought of going out in something like that, I mean, no, I don't think so.
I just wonder, though, who has got the right to dictate what somebody else wears?
Well, no
do you know
one,
what?
not really, no.
Yeah, if you think you look good in it, crack on. We've had some interesting thoughts from you listeners. Anne says 30 is still young. What I hate is women in the 60s and 70s wearing tight, short, low-cut clothes, long hair and very high heels. Nothing worse than mutton dressed as lamb, which actually makes women look older. Interesting thought about the hair there, because somebody else has texted in to ask what our view is on young girls growing their hair down to waist level, as it appears to be the current fashion. How are they able to do their schoolwork with hair all over their desks?
What happens if they get nits is what I want to know, because they do get them in secretary. I have to say, though, I do look at people that dress like this and think, fair play, because if you've got the confidence to look in the mirror and go, I look great today, well, you're probably doing the rest of us, you're doing a great job. I think it's, fair play.
John says, all comes down to whether you have the body. Age is just a number. If you've got it, flaunt it. Plenty of hot 30 to 40-year-olds around. Absolutely. Jane, you're nodding there. Would you, mini skirt?
I totally agree. If you've got it, flaunt it, do it. I loved my hot pants in the 70s because I was a 70s girl. Fabulous.
And she has got red clogs on, by the way.
Mel says, I think if Stu Peters can squeeze into his hot pants, then it's okay for anyone. There's an image I didn't need.
Ooh.
Really? We've posted on the Women Today Facebook page about this as well, and some differing views. Mandy says, I think women can wear whatever they want, whenever they want, so can men. I saw Grace Kelly perform at a festival a few years ago, and her legs and thighs were amazing. It would be a crime not to show them off, says Fee. I think it entirely depends on the woman's muscle tone and body shape. If they can carry it off, why not? However, it needs to be tasteful, not trashy. I don't think Madonna, who's the picture that we've posted, has quite the body shape to carry it off in the same way. Stacey says, if 60 is the new 40, absolutely.
I have a problem, though, with these cheap black leggings that are a little bit too thin, that I tend to see a lot of older ladies wearing. Don't need to see lingerie as well, do we?
Vicky says, I think women should be free to wear whatever they want. I also think it's unfair to judge people on appearances. I'm over 60 and wear whatever I'm comfortable in. And Carol says, definitely not. Time and a place. 60 plus is not the time. Luckily, I had my time to do this, although parents protested. Apparently, men of the same age should steer clear of ponytails, baggy below-the-waist jeans and dropped crotch trousers, Hugh. Not wearing any of those today.
That sounds very sensible.
Alex, though, what jeans have you got on today? Dropped to the knees.
No, my jeans are... The crotch is in the right place, Joe. I'm going to say no more. I don't know, you see. You and I have been friends for a long time, Beth, and I don't remember you ever wandering around in your 20s in hot pants or anything else like this. So is this something I missed from your past?
Oh, it must have been. Seriously, let me tell you.
I don't know. I'm coming up here every day, I just seem to notice a bit of a trend in a lot of these stories, international stories, and they're all about people being judgmental about others. And it's the fact that, if... So what if someone's wearing something that you think, it doesn't, I don't like the look of this, I don't like the look of that. But, as long as it's not obscene, fine, who cares?
Now, a 24-year-old singer-songwriter who's been compared to Joni Mitchell and Alanis Morissette is going to be performing in the Isle of Man tomorrow. Ledra Chapman rose to fame a few years ago when Terry Wogan championed her debut single, Story. And she's been here before, performing at the Garden Party in 2012 and previously at the Outback in Douglas in 2010, where apparently she kissed Bob Harrison. She's going to be at the Peel Centenary Centre tomorrow evening, and Kate caught up with her this morning ahead of the gig.
Read all about it. Brought to you by St Paul's Bookshop of Ramsey.
I'm trying to feel what you just said, and I want to reply, but I'm hurting. I'll just swallow my words and let it go.
Well, I've always been a singer since I was a little girl. My dad's always been a musician as I was growing up, which kind of helped. So there was lots of instruments around the house when I was growing up and bits of recording equipment. So I think when I was 12 and started getting an interest in playing guitar, it kind of came very naturally to me. I kind of picked up the guitar and it just felt right, and I learnt my first few chords and then started writing songs. And I know it sounds silly, but it really was as simple as that for me. It was just kind of instant, you know.
At 12 years old, what were you writing songs about?
I think there was a boy next door I had a crush on.
The usual.
Well, yeah, I had a bit of a tough time at school. I was bullied at school, so I think that I used it as my outlet to vent about that too. So, yeah, it was a form of therapy for me, maybe.
You rose to prominence, I suppose, in 2009, really. Have you got any particular career highlights so far?
I mean, being on This Morning for the first time was pretty daunting. Singing into the camera that looks like a giant Dalek. That was quite scary, but it was obviously an amazing experience. But I think probably one of the biggest highlights for me was 2 years ago playing at Smooth Radio's live show in Liverpool, because it was 35,000 people, and I was asked to go and play, and that was an incredible show, and they've actually invited me back this year, which is really exciting.
Do you get nervous?
It's funny, actually. I'm getting a lot better. The last kind of 2-3 years, for some reason I've had really bad stage fright, but in the past 6 months, maybe probably because I've just been touring so much, not so much at the moment. I'm kind of getting more just really excited before I go on stage, lots of adrenaline, but beforehand, I mean, before that, I was getting worse and worse. I was getting really terrified before going on and performing, like to the point where I'd like want to bolt and leave the venue. But then it's funny because the second I'm on stage, I feel absolutely fine, you know, and I feel at home. I think it's just before I go on that you kind of get a little bit panicky.
Do you have any sort of routines before you go on stage?
Well, the London show's normally my mum pushing me on stage.
Marissa Jones, you watch the black suits walking past. Your life was empty for a while. Michael Porter has a new girl in his arms. She has a cherry-flavoured smile. You watch as he greets her, his arms around her shoulder.
How difficult do you think it is for young female singer-songwriters in this kind of age to get started?
Well, I suppose it's really hard because of the internet, and there's so much more competition out there. I mean, I did have that, obviously, but even in 2010, it was nowhere near as prominent as it is now. Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So radio played a big part in it for me, for getting off the ground. So I guess to get to that point that I did, where I was having my songs played on the radio, I think I kind of stopped caring so much about what everyone was expecting my album to sound like. And me and Peter Fatesi, who produced this new album and the first album, just had our hearts set on making the music we felt really proud of. I would say to any young singer-songwriters out there, don't be trying to chase whatever sound is huge and on the radio now, because by the time you get there and you get to a point of getting that music heard, the music industry's already moved on to what other quirky sound is out there, you know? So just do what feels right to you and what sounds you want to make and what songs you want to write. And the more honest you are about that, the more other people believe it and will love it.
She ever stayed.
So tomorrow night you're performing at the Peel Centenary Centre. How did that come about?
Well, I played at the Isle of Man a few times now at a festival, and I think my first headline show there was in 2010, and I didn't get a chance to visit there on my last tour, so we got in touch and booked this show in for May, because we wanted it to be a bit sunnier, because my tour was in February, March, so hopefully the weather will be good this weekend.
I'm not going to tell you the forecast.
Oh no, it's bad.
You have been a couple of times before, as you say. What kind of impression have you got of the Isle of Man?
Oh, I adored it. It's such a beautiful island, and everyone's really friendly, and everyone's really hungry for music there as well, especially live music. And I really got that vibe last time I was there, which is why I was so keen to come back.
Well, break a leg in Peel. We hope no one has to kind of push you on stage.
Definitely not. I'm really excited about it.
Thanks as always to our amazing guests. And as ever, it's never too late for you to get involved. Head over to Facebook, find the Women Today Facebook page, and you can comment there, or you can follow us at MR Women Today on Twitter. And you can listen again to the full programmes on manxradio.com, or join us every weekday live from just after 2:00.
Women Today, brought to you by citywing.com for your next flight away.